So I have been listening to your podcast since it was called a Pleasure Monkey podcast back in the day. It wasn't that long ago. Um, but I really liked listening to it, and kind of what you're talking about now. I know you've kind of switched it up and it's all about like your truth and your authenticity. And I feel like I always got that from you. And I feel like if you're talking about, improving yourself, it always comes from the mind first and knowing yourself first. So can you kind of talk about like how you found your truth and how you are like kind of finding yourself, and what that's been like?
Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks for having me on, and it's really been interesting because you say that it comes from your mind first, and I think for a lot of people that's the case because we end up with our mind ends up creating a narrative for our lives. You look back on your life and you end up you kind of put the dots together as to why you are where you are, and being
Mm-hmm.
objective about that. And I found that originally through fitness, through coaching people and CrossFit and strength and conditioning. I say CrossFit, even though it was more, I guess, strength and conditioning and development programs that I did with people, and CrossFit Kids, which was so fun.
Mm-hmm.
So I get a chance to be extremely objective and real with myself based on numbers first, which is very heady. So here's one thing that was really great about that beginning was that I got to look at actual numbers and not compare myself to others so much, but compare myself to myself. And over 7 years of that kind of
You mean like
training up.
performance? Or you mean like your numbers and your times for like runs and weightlifting? Is that what you mean?
Exactly, right. So that doesn't really lie to you, right? You can't.
Yeah.
It is. That's I developed the kind of understanding of looking at a full spectrum of life and through the lens of where are your limiters and what can you do to address the limiters. You can be really honest with yourself about where you excel and where you may be bottlenecked or limited. Well, you can look at your life like through that lens, then you can start to broaden yourself a little bit more and focus there and find out, what's working, what's not working. And through that style of training and competing in that, so you're constantly in this world of like comparison and expectation. I learned how to breathe. I learned how to be mindful of my physical body. And through that, like slowly, my buddy Mike Slimmy and I kind of had the same path. He's a kettlebell expert and super mindful, grounded dude. And it started at working out, and then it turned into working in. And that's we took the same philosophy and mentality and started applying it to our internal fitness.
Ah.
And that's why I go from into lifestyle design. That's why we call it what it is, because we're really creating structures around yourself and your being and who you're being for your own life and how you're showing up for that, to be able to open up the boundaries and really experience life more fully.
So you're saying you went body first and then mind. So I feel like I'm kind of going the opposite way. There's probably not a right way.
They all kind of funnel back to the mind, right? So like
Yeah.
I was using logic and understanding for my body's processes. I would say I went body first or mind first, body, and then heart. If I
And
can
then
put that
heart.
together, it's
Yeah.
like self and understanding deeply who I chose and wanted to be for my life. And of course, things like plant medicines and meditation and breath work and just creating space from what the known patterns of my life really helped a ton with that as well.
Okay, so you talk about plant medicines, and this is one that I'm interested in, but I feel like a weird opinion on it. I almost feel like it's cheating. Like it's like chutes and ladders and you're like jumping over a ladder instead of climbing it. Like, do you know what I mean? Like I haven't done it. So I mean, that's like my never have done it perspective, but what's your perspective? Like having done it, and in what ways did it help you?
Well, I feel like that's a very logical understanding. I mean, perception of what's going on there, and there are ways, right? There are ways to unpack yourself without psychedelics, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that being said, I also feel like there's a lot of undoing that happens through the psychedelic experience with psilocybin mushrooms, things like ayahuasca, particularly these medicinal plants that have been used for thousands of years. And if you think about our life the way it is now, and given that we've been on this planet for a long time, you know, maybe 200,000 years ish, maybe 50,000 years, who knows? But life is a lot different now than it used to be. And there's a lot of, I say we're kind of a confused species. Like we're kind of these advanced monkey things, but we kind of also have this crazy technology where we can connect and experience all kinds of different cultures and realities and ideas. And it can be somewhat overwhelming. And then we end up in this place of what really drove us in a tribal culture kind of puts us in a precarious situation now. And sometimes it's nice. And this is where I feel like plant medicines come into play here to break through all of the noise and get into yourself and do some undoing, a lot of like defragging of your experience. You know, a lot of people will even have that experience on ayahuasca or any kind of DMT derived psychedelic where they feel like their brain is getting defragged, like it's getting, and I know if you have an old PC, you know what defragging is, where it just takes all the clutter and like starts to put it into files, and you get much more capacity to experience, be curious, and light up some neurons that haven't been used in a long time. So it's not so much about getting to a destination or skipping the ladder. It's about, you know, broadening the way that you see the world. And then with that, I feel like in mindfulness practice and proper integration, you can go from there into choosing your path and choosing your experiences with more, I would say, more heart, honestly, and less mind.
Gotcha. So it's just letting you follow your intuition more after you kind of let go of all those constructs. Is that?
Yeah, a lot of that, and just understanding what really matters to you. You know, like for example, a good friend of mine, his first ayahuasca experience, he had just had a baby. His baby was like 2 months old, and he saw his wife and his child, and he was so happy to see them in this kind of dark experience. And then they got this being or some kind of entity. And sometimes you see things where it doesn't really, it's not like a person, but it's an energy, just pulled his wife and kids away, and they just like went into the distance so far that he couldn't see them anymore. They just disappeared, and he was so crushed and sad, and it was hard for him. But what he realized was the feeling that he had when they were there versus the feeling he had when they weren't.
Mm-hmm.
And he could take that contrast into his day-to-day life and really appreciate the people that are right in front of his face that so often in life get overlooked, and enter that situation with more love and more acknowledgement and more presence, especially when you have work and all those other things that are pulling you in different directions. Like really truly being there, the ones you love, like that's a profound experience. And you can have that through meditation or breath work or these other things. It's just, they're all just some kind of tool, but they're all given to us by the earth, you know?
Yeah. So what other tools do you use, like kind of in your day to day? What's your like mindfulness practice?
So journaling is my day-to-day ride or die. Like if I don't journal, I feel like my life isn't really, or my day isn't really complete.
Mm-hmm.
And to the point where I even made a journal called the Intention Journal that I have out as well. But journaling and free writing is something I've been doing for a couple years now. I actually have a 5 lines a day little mini journal that is 5 years long, and I'm on year number 4 right now. So I can look
Wow.
back and see how things have changed over the past 3 years every day, which I think is very, very important to understand the flexibility of who we can be and how much you can change in a few years and how much you can grow, what you can learn from, and also the patterns that you can be stuck in. So I love journaling. I have 2 journals I journal in every morning. And when I say every morning, I mean 6 days a week, probably. There may be one day where things get a little crazy and I have to put it off till the afternoon. But I absolutely love that. And then meditation for me has been something I've gotten deeper and deeper into over time. I wouldn't say I'm a pro meditator, but I know that when I can sit and be still and let myself feel my whole body. And I love Vipassana meditation. People like Tara Brach and Jack Kornfield are some great teachers that I've kind of adapted my practice from. And it feels so nice to just anchor into what's real in yourself through that. And
Yeah. So when you say free writing, what does that mean to you? And like, what are you actually journaling? If I can ask you that, like, I mean, do you write like
great.
goals? Do you have mantras, or are you just like kind of documenting for memories? Like, what does it look like for you?
Yeah, so it's really, that's the free part. It is whatever it needs to be for that day. Today was very much more task oriented this morning, where I'm picking up my whole life and going on a little world tour, and I have a lot of things I have to finish before next Tuesday when I leave. So
Yeah.
so I've got 6 days to do things like get rid of a car and get packed up and decide what I'm taking and getting everything into 2 bags, right? Like this is
Yeah.
so there was, when I'm in that place of like, let me be pragmatic and feel out where I'm at. That helps me kind of clear the noise, is a term I use a lot. Clear the noise and get down to being, fully being present for what I'm doing and where I need to be. And then when you said mantras, I love that. I have mantras that come up through that journaling as well, where I'll either rewrite ones that have come to me. Like we had the Realness retreat last weekend, and we had a sound healing, and one mantra that came up through the sound healing with the singing bowls was connect and receive. So when I'm in that place and I'm writing, I'll usually, for whatever reason, the second page is, I usually do 2 pages. At the bottom, I'll end up at the conclusion of the journaling will be connect and receive. And I'll write that down and be very present with that. And there's something about what I believe to be resonance. And this is going to sound a little woo-woo. I don't know how woo-woo your audience is, but
I'm like super woo woo. So
good. So when you think about the word resonance, and this is something that Paul Selig, who is a channel, and something I didn't believe in. Not that I didn't believe in it, but I thought it was kind of out there. I was like, I don't know about this channeling business until I met the guy and read one of his books. And it was really impactful. And one thing he talked about was through the guides that channel through him was resonance. And I think if anybody listening can think about those times when you hear something or somebody says something that just, you feel it viscerally through your whole body, like that's what resonance is. Like something about that phrase and that sound and the understanding of what those sounds mean, it's more than words. And that's what I believe mantras to be as well. Through lifestyle design, sometimes we'll work on finding a mantra. And when you can find one that resonates with you, that has a lot of your truth in it, and you can repeat that, and in the morning, through your writing, in your meditation, like if it keeps coming up for you, there is something to be said for having that to anchor into and take that into your day-to-day life and kind of remind yourself who you are and where you're at and who you're choosing to be.
yeah, I find those, I'm glad you said that, because I listened to the podcast, Aubrey Marcus podcast, with that channel. And I had a hard time connecting to it. I think I was more distracted by, how he kind of talks in doubles, like where it was like that. I had a really hard time. Just that was like tripping me up. And I know that stuff like that happens to me with books. Like it'll be like, no matter what I'm doing, like this book will not work for me, and I'll have to put it away and come back to it. So I feel like that's something I have to like, I wasn't really ready for it, but I'm interested, and I want to like revisit.
I was in the room for that podcast. Seeing him in person
Oh, really?
is yeah. So
I'm sure it's totally different. I'm sure it's
I got a
totally
chance to
different.
talk to him afterwards and had a complete emotional breakdown. So
Yeah.
in a good way,
A good
in a really
one.
good way.
Okay.
Got to do things. And if you read his books, like the Book of Truth, and he has I think 4 books. Those are just the channel. Like there's no saying and repeating. It's just the
Yeah,
words. So that's
that
how he
might be a
gets it
better
super
way.
fast. It's like mumbling and then repeating essentially.
Uh-huh.
Funny too, because I don't know if he'll admit this. I mean, I'd love to have him on my show just to see what that's all about. But he sometimes you'll catch him saying something, and then it's like the guys will say it through him, and then he'll say it, and he'll say it differently. And it's like, oh, they
Oh,
said something that the guide said something that Paul doesn't feel comfortable saying.
gotcha.
Right? It was really,
So
really
there's
funny.
some
So
editing almost.
I think based upon the audience, because he's getting a lot of, and he talks about this. He's like, sometimes not that, and the guys will say Paul's interfering right now. It's really funny, but it's so out there. I know it sounds crazy that we're talking about this, but Um, it's wild, and they'll call him out for his bullshit. It's just like, and the thing about it is, the guy is like, he doesn't really want to be famous, and he's just doing this work, and it's almost like you could tell he had been confused about it for the longest time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a wild experience, but that, you know, could come back around. Like the words that he speaks are, they repeat enough things where there's definitely some resonance in that. And some of the things that he said to myself and Aubrey were really just like, it was a lot, and it kind of just like a sound healing when you have certain resonance of the singing bowls and things like that. Like when we had the sound healing at the Realness retreat, you know, the woman who was doing it, Tina, she's incredible, and you could hear, you know, I'm kind of staying more out of the experiences, hoping everyone had a good time. So I was definitely in my head a lot, and other facilitators were as well. But the people that were the guests at the retreat was like sobbing and breaking through and having visions and like body experiences, and just like it just. And my encouragement for them going in was like, find the tension in your body and just start to let that go with the sound, and the emotions will come out of that. Like if you're emotionally guarded in your shoulder or your heart or your throat or your stomach or your hips, like feel into that through the sound, that things will come from that you did not expect. And there's so many other practices like that are not far away from a psychedelic experience from the recounts of that, but they're available all the time, and it's just sound, right? You're not going to jail for sound,
right?
You know, a couple of years ago you might have got burned at the stake, but I think that's they're kind of backing off of that. So
Yeah, that's so interesting. I've had one like gong experience, and it was really weird how you could feel it in your body. Like I just wasn't expecting it. Are there any other things like that, like sound healing, that you've experienced?
Breath work. I haven't done holotropic breath work. It was so funny. We had a woman, a really great teacher named Anahata. I'm pretty sure that's not her birth name. And she's like one of those people. She's like just crazy enough. You know what I mean? Like she's just a little out there. But people had these really profound experiences with breath work, and I had like head cold that I was just trying to get rid of while she was in town. Just like go to this. I kept putting it off. I'm like, I just want to go to a breath work ceremony. And I had to give my spot away because I was like, I just couldn't breathe through my nose. This is gonna be bad. Coughing and like having to have like somewhere to spit. It's gonna be gross. So I didn't do that, but I did get a chance to spend some time with Wim Hof, and those experiences, challenging the mind through that. I think there's something. I think a lot of that comes down to in the breathwork practices like his, where it comes down to challenging your body and your mind and what you think you're capable of. I know that happens in ayahuasca as well. It's a common theme where you're holding your breath and you've hyper oxygenated your body. Then you have a deep breath hold for over a minute, and you feel all the emotions of freak out, right? Like, oh, my face kind of feels weird, and then my chest, like, and you start to panic, and then you get right on the other side of that, and it's peace. And there's like peace in holding your breath, and you've like supercharged your body. And it's like, oh wow, everything's gonna be okay. And just like in life, if you can get through that fucking anxious, like I don't know, feeling, it's peace, right? Just like jumping out of an airplane. It's like you freak out until you're falling, and then you're kind of still freaking out, and then you hit the parachute, and you're like, poof,
this
peace.
Is fun.
And that's something that I feel like happens so many times. And what I've had in ayahuasca as well, where it's like crazy madness, darkness. And then you get it's like playing Zelda or Mario. It's like you get to the thing, and it's all like at the very end you're like fighting Bowser or whatever the demon is, and then you find the key to the puzzle, and then everything just floats away, and it just stillness to the point where I actually had an ayahuasca experience where my second one, where I was kind of in this dark masculine energy and couldn't figure it out. I was trying to fight this demon type energy. It was like telling me these darkest things, like how it had me and my dad and my brother and all these wild experiences. And I was just trying to fight it for like 3 hours. And I was sweating and shaking. And then I was just exhausted. And in my vision, I was just kind of like done. I gave up, and quit. And then my dad and my brother showed up in the vision, and they were there, and we just gave each other a big hug. And then we were all crying in the vision, I mean, my dad was my age. So my brother's a year younger than me, and then my dad is obviously older. And we were all the same age, kind of in that like late 20s area. It was so strange. It was like young dad, and we gave each other a big hug, and then the vision just stopped. And it wasn't like it stopped, like the vision stopped. I was just sitting up. I was very calm. And even the music that was playing, the Icaros that the shamans were playing, like those were muffled and like distant. It was just silence and peace. And I think a lot of life is like that. And you get to feel that, and it's like, oh, I can't fight this darkness with more negative energy, frustration, anxiety, fear, anger. It was just see the love in it, and that love can dissolve all of that nonsense.
Yeah. Wow. So, but knowing that there's ayahuasca and you can get that experience on this hand, and then knowing that there's like sound healing or breath work or whatever on this hand, when you look at them, are there any like, it seems like you can get the same effect, but are there any like pros or cons that kind of make you favor one or the other, or there's kind of a place for both? Like, what is your thoughts on it?
I think they both have a place, right? So I would say that ayahuasca I haven't done ayahuasca in 2 years. Something I do rarely and only when I feel really called to it. Meditation is something you can do anytime, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's an accessibility about that. Like there's something that's like very accessible. And also when it comes to psychedelics, like there is this point of you don't have the option to edit what's happening in the moment. Afterwards, you can kind of create a narrative. And there's definitely there's some people who tell ayahuasca stories that I hear them a couple days after and they're one story, and then I hear them a year later and I'm like, well, that got way more elaborate over the past 12 months. It's like,
yeah,
it's very low. But there's something about completely having to let go of control in the psychedelic experience or being punished for it, right? So if you're in meditation and your mind wanders and you bring it back, and your mind wanders and you bring it back, and you feel tension, and you can kind of have more control versus having the faith to completely break the tether that's holding you to reality and then go see what's there, because you're really just exposing yourself to yourself. And that's one thing I think that if you be like, oh, I'm scared of losing control, as what people will say when it comes to ayahuasca experiences or psychedelics in general. And it's like, well, one, you don't really have control. Two, the only thing you're going to see is yourself in an interesting way that may be very novel. But so one of the scariest things you'll ever see is yourself with all your bullshit.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you touched on this a little bit. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
The difference I would say, but to actually answer your question, is just the depth at which you can go without a choice, right? You're really having to surrender to the experience.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. I still like, I'm just personally like, should I do this? I'm scared of this. Is it good to be scared? Like, it's like a weird thing.
Well, and a good place to start for a lot of people is psilocybin mushrooms, which are they're my favorite plant medicine, like hands down. There's a difference, like ayahuasca, DMT feel like there's lessons there, but it doesn't feel like mushrooms and psilocybin feel like home, like a place where I go to learn, but experience and be and share. I feel very drawn to share the psilocybin experience. There's something about it. It feels very familial.
Like doing it with a group of people, or you mean after telling your story?
Telling the story and facilitating for other people, yes.
Gotcha. Okay.
There's something about psilocybin that keeps you enough in this world to be able to stay somewhat grounded. And I would even say more grounded a lot of times. And helps you take that little voice inside of yourself that can just be a pain in the ass and quiet it for a little while. There's something about, if you've ever wanted to see the world through the eyes of a child, right? Like see a tree for the first time and watch birds fly and see how just incredible that little experience that happens thousands of times a day is, and how meaningful life can truly be. Like something about the psychedelic experience as well is you don't really lose that or forget that. Like that stays with you. To be able to really see with other people, like through their bullshit, and see who they are, and in their eyes, there's just something about it that really I feel is very empowering, and can lead to a more open and conscious way of living through self-exploration, and understanding the connectedness to everything, and that connectedness to your own actions and the way that you're being seen in the world.
Yeah, that's huge. So you touched on this a little, and I wanted to get into it. It's you said you're going on like a nomad trip. Like, what does that mean? Like, are you literally getting rid of all your stuff, and like going backpacking, or what's going on?
Yeah, so if you could see behind me right now, it's like all of my clothes.
Hmm.
I got a couple new bags. I got a Ruka camera dry bag that holds all
Cool.
my podcast gear and all my journals and my laptop and all that kind of fun stuff, and some snacks, of course. And then I had a friend at Patagonia who hooked me up with a 120-liter Patagonia dry bag as well. That's like luggage. And I decided I'm going to get my whole life into those two bags. And I've been wanting to, I talk a lot about through lifestyle design, breaking patterns,
Hmm.
understanding patterns, understanding where your limitations are, and then having an understanding that human beings do have we generate a way of being based on our surroundings more often than we want to believe. Right? There's not as much freedom as we think there is. I've been in Austin for about 8 years. Before that, I was in San Marcos, which is just a Texas state just down the road. And before that, I was in Graham, Texas. So I've been in Texas my whole life, and had been feeling really called since I was like 19 to just get the fuck out of here, like just to get out of here for like, in Texas, and just away from what I'd known. And for me, a big step was going to Texas State, and I didn't really know anyone, and I got to be whoever I really wanted to be, and challenge some stuff. And I got like some tattoos for the first time, and got some gauges, and just did some silly stuff, just like, really exploring myself and feeling out what I liked. And looking back, I see how impactful that was. And now I've been in Austin for a long time. I was in the fitness industry for a long time here. I owned a gym here. I worked for On It. I've done the podcast. I've met so many amazing people, and I'm ready to explore outside of that. When I went to I was in LA for about 2 weeks a few months ago, probably about 6 months ago now, and I felt like in that place, and I spent enough time there afterwards to make sure I wasn't just making this up. I
Hmm.
felt like being around new people who were very driven. Um, I felt like I was being seen differently, and I felt more full in that, in that exploring. And I had to get very honest with myself about who I wanted to be in my life, and what may not be serving me now, which is really challenging because there was a lot of letting go of things that I liked but just didn't like enough for what they were taking, or not taking from me, but what the energetic investment was into those things. So actually met a friend via Instagram who's into very similar things that I am. She lives in Toronto. My lease is up. I had fulfilled my lease obligation, and there's one big boundary between me and getting out of here, and that's getting rid of my car. And one thing I've noticed about that, like everything seemed to just fall into place. Like the bags I needed, like just happened. I got them all at least 50% off. Like the podcast gear that I needed, I changed all that over to a smaller setup that actually works much better. My parents are going to store some of my stuff. The rest of it's getting given away. It just all like lined up, and there's this one looming thing, and it's really challenging my ego to figure out and get resourceful about how I'm going to get rid of my car. And then after that, I'm homeless without a car, and I'm off to Toronto, and then I got invited down to Costa Rica to do some ayahuasca down there and do some podcasting down there. And I haven't booked a return flight yet. I think I'll probably book one about a month after I get down there, but I'll have flexibility. And then it's Toronto, Costa Rica, then Tulum most likely, maybe back to Toronto, maybe to LA. But I just knew that it was time for me to create as much openness and break as many fucking patterns as I could. And I had to put my money where my mouth is, and test my ability and really see what could happen if I just opened up so much space to allow things to come in.
That is so funny. I'm kind of in a similar scenario, but I want to know about the car. Is it like, are you like emotionally attached to this car, or you can't find someone to buy it, or what's that holdup that you're talking about?
Well, that's a good question. There's negative equity in the car, so it's like
Oh,
if
I
I go
see.
start a dealership, I lose some money, which is another one ego hit, or I start really experiencing like asking people that I know could use it as like a company car. Like it's just getting very resourceful, and some of the people that
Mhm.
I need to ask, it puts me in like I'm asking for help
Yeah,
essentially, which is something that I've been challenged with my whole life. And it's like, can you ante up? And you know it's a benefit. You know it's going to be a mutual value. It's not like I'm conning someone, but it's
yeah,
can I fucking ask for help from
yeah.
people that the most essentially it puts me
It's
in a
like
situation. I
asking
don't
for a favor or losing money. Like, what do you value more? Is that what it is?
asking for help for someone that the last person on the face of the earth that I want to ask for help from.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what needs to happen for me to then move on. And it's perfect.
But that's a funny exercise. That's like what you have to do, like what you got to deal with and like work through. Is that
Exactly.
is that thing?
Because it's not the clothes stuff doesn't matter, all this other stuff, but like that, yeah, I live pretty minimally anyways. I live in my little room and I just do my thing, and that car represents a part of my life. I really feel like these possessions do represent like where you are at a certain time, and a
Hmm.
part of my life that, if I'm being honest with myself, like I actually resent quite a bit, or I have resented quite a bit. So it's a big practice for me, and I'm actually excited, nervous, and to be completely honest, scared as fuck. But that's the last thing. Once that happens, it's I can even feel it in my body, like just like so much freedom in that. Because I felt kind of trapped financially, for a while, and that's been very, very wild. Leaving a steady job, doing the podcast thing, doing lifestyle design, having a lot of faith in who I am and what I bring to the world and the value that I bring to others. And I think stepping into this part of my life will only build on that, because it shows that I really am practicing what I preach at a high level, and creating experiences that gives people permission. That's what I love to do. So if I can get out and challenge myself, I think that with an audience, it gives people permission to do the same. And even if it's not on the same scale, but it's small incremental changes.
Yeah, I think that too. I try to make small incremental changes, but then I feel like that feeling you talk about, where you're like, I just need to like blow this whole thing up and just like change everything. I kind of just did that. If you can see, I am in the woods. I'm in a house, a cabin in the woods, and I quit my job like a couple weeks ago and just moved here,
Yeah.
and I live here now. And so it's like it's really, really weird. It feels awesome. But like what you're talking about with your car, I'm finding the same things are coming up for me. Like this is like the sweetest setup, like the most perfect scenario. But there are certain things that come up, and it's like you feel something, and I'm like, oh, this is. Of course, you're bringing this up now. Like, of course, I have to like deal with my issues, you know. So it's pretty interesting. But can you talk a little bit more about lifestyle design and like what you take people through and like the approach to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So lifestyle design started out as really, I had a pattern. I had a pattern that I'd seen in my own life as in reflection, and big part of it is patterns, actually. So we start out with awareness, and this is the thing that gets really, and why I call it lifestyle design and not coaching. I kind of hide away from that coaching term, because I was a coach for so long. And to me, a coach means that I have answers that you don't have, right? So if someone came to me for weightlifting specifically and coaching, like that's because I knew more about weightlifting than they did, and I could watch them do their thing. I'd be like, oh, well, I give them drills, I give them answers, and I would address the issues. In lifestyle design, the thing that's different is that I believe that everybody has the answers they need. They might just need help seeing them and seeing themselves. So we start out with an awareness practice, and those can be variable depending on the person. I really do the work to get to know someone and where they're at in their life and what would be impactful for them. One thing that I look back on my life that I've invested heavily into is resources and understanding what's out there and what options are out there. So if you go to Google and you say, I want to make my life better, you're going to get a bunch of BuzzFeed articles and top 10 ways to meditate, like things like that. And it's a lot of noise. So by empathetic exchanges with people and creating a space of really non-judgmental expression, then I can get to know where you're at and what may work for you. We just start picking low-hanging fruit from there. So if journaling is, I feel like, the most pragmatic and impactful practice, then we'll implement that. And of course, you'll have accountability on that. We'll unpack that. If meditation really draws to you, then we'll go that way. If there's a book that I feel like you need to read, then I'll keep you accountable there, and we'll set that up as well. So we're just creating an awareness practice. And then through that, we really try to understand the patterns that serve and the patterns that don't. Like looking at what's working and looking at what's not working. And by holding judgment in a really judgment-free space, and get very honest and speak things out that you probably wouldn't be able to speak out any other way, whether that be about your job, your relationship, the way your nutrition, like all these things. Like I feel like there's so many components of life that we feel inadequate, and then we can speak that out without somebody telling us how we should feel. Well, then there's so much freedom in that you can hear yourself say the things and be like, oh, well, that makes sense. How can we address that? And you go a few steps further than you would in your day-to-day interactions. And through that, we address those patterns. And if the ones that don't serve, we break them. One thing that I do, I work with a lot with, people in their mid-20s, and that's when that's a time of your life where you start to really challenge your identity. So for a guy, for example, say we're talking about a guy, like getting into the yoga class and you engage with way different people, just going a couple times a week or once a week, and you have to put yourself in a place where you're probably the worst in the room, right? And for women sometimes, like, oh yeah, I do yoga all the time. That's great. I've been doing it for years. Awesome. Well, now let's go to a hip hop dance class where you're not the boss, right? Especially if it's a strong, kind of empowered woman and is usually in control. When you go over here where you're probably going to be the worst in the room, it's going to be a little bit awkward. You're going to challenge yourself, and you're probably going to laugh your ass off, right? And through that, you break the pattern. The neurons in your brain get to use themselves or get to connect in a different way than normal. And through that, new ideas, new realizations, new breakthroughs come through, and we can discuss that, talk about that. And then taking the patterns that may serve us well and really investing into those if that's necessary. So it's this objective look at an individual person without judgment, and allowing for a more authentic version of yourself to flow through.
Yeah, that sounds really, really awesome and powerful. So thank you so, sorry?
Sorry. We do it via it's 8 weeks of video calls, kind of like what we're doing now. Exactly.
8 weeks. Oh, awesome. And is it one-on-one or is it groups?
So I do some groups sometimes, mostly one-on-one. Usually if I do a group, it's a handful of people that have done one-on-one. I want to get together, and then that's really fun too. And we do the retreats now as well. So that's really, really fun because you get to bounce. It's people that have already put in some of that work, and I get to bounce off and see how other people are doing the same, and the things that are the same and the things that are different. It's really beautiful. I have such a good time with it. I'm really grateful to be able to do it as well.
It sounds really awesome. Where can people find out how to learn about that or sign up for it?
Yeah, so you get a free 20-minute video call if you go to gettherealness.com. So Get the Realness, and then there's a lifestyle design tab there. It's just name, email is all we need from you. We'll set something up. A lot more about the program there as well. So there's that, and then there's the Realness community on Facebook. So you jump on Facebook and go to the Realness community, or you can link it in the description. That's free access as well. More of that fun stuff, and a lot of big changes coming. So super stoked on that. The community is awesome. We're at 944 people, I think, in there now. So it's really fun, and it's grown so much over the past year, and I'm extremely grateful for that. I mean, the community has been really when everything's got tough, and I get to show up for those people. It really helps me have that one-on-one engagement, or one-on-one engagement with people's questions. And we do live Q&As in there every week, and then we just get to share each other. It's a space for that, developed for that specifically.
That's amazing. I'm going to join. I need to join that immediately. And where can we find you on Instagram?
So I am Connor Wanders on Instagram. So Conner Wanders with an A, Wanders. Connor
Awesome.
Wanders.
Well, thank you so much for being here and chatting with me today. I really enjoyed
Of
it.
course. Thank you so much.